On the mid-afternoon of Thanksgiving Eve, 1971, a man in a professional business suit boarded Northwest Orient Flight 305 in Portland, Oregon. Shortly after reaching cruising altitude, he ordered a bourbon and soda and handed the flight attendant a folded piece of paper. The note calmly stated that he had a bomb. His demands were specific: $200,000 in $20 bills and 4 parachutes. After authorities delivered the ransom in Seattle and the plane took off again, the man lowered the rear stairs and jumped into the freezing rain somewhere over the dense forests of Washington state. No one had ever successfully executed a mid-air heist and vanished. In the 5 decades since, no one has replicated the feat. The crime, attributed to the alias D.B. Cooper, remains the single unsolved case of air piracy in global commercial aviation history. For nearly 50 years, the FBI chased dead ends. The official investigation was severely hindered when crucial physical evidence from the cabin, specifically head hair samples and cigarette butts left in Cooper's ashtray, were contaminated, lost, or destroyed in storage. While the biological evidence was compromised, the inorganic particles left on the aircraft proved far more resilient. By applying 21st-century forensic science to these surviving artifacts, independent investigators are now exposing chemical signatures that were previously invisible, providing a new path toward his true identity. This 3D wireframe details the flight parameters Cooper demanded before takeoff. He ordered the pilots to maintain an altitude under 10,000 feet, keep the cabin unpressurized, leave the landing gear down, and deploy the wing flaps to 15 degrees. These specifications prove he possessed an intimate, professional knowledge of flight dynamics. Those parameters were necessary to safely operate the unique aft air stair. By keeping the plane low, slow, and unpressurized, Cooper ensured the rear stairwell could physically open without structural failure. Yet his actual jump presents a stark contradiction. He stepped into a 200-mile-per-hour wind at 7 degrees Fahrenheit at night during a rainstorm, wearing a business suit and loafers. Furthermore, of the 4 parachutes provided, he selected a primary chute that could not be steered. For his reserve, he chose a dummy unit used strictly for classroom instruction, a parachute with its canopy literally sewn shut. On paper, jumping with a sewn-shut parachute implies a suicidal amateur. However, a man who perfectly configured a commercial jetliner for a mid-air exit likely recognized the dummy chute. If he was resourceful under pressure, he may have intentionally selected it, cutting its useless shroud lines to tie the heavy 21-pound bag of ransom money securely to his body. Before jumping, Cooper removed his black JCPenney clip-on tie and left it on seat 18E. For decades, it sat in an evidence locker. Today, it is the most critical artifact in the investigation. In 2009, a research team placed the tie under a scanning electron microscope. They used specialized sticky stubs to lift over 100,000 microscopic particles embedded deep in the fabric's weave. This visual breakdown isolates the most striking discovery: 3 specks of a highly specific titanium antimony alloy found near the tie clip. By checking U.S. patents from the era, researchers mapped this exact alloy directly back to a single manufacturer, Crucible Steel in Pennsylvania. This microscopic metal shifts the search from military jump zones to aerospace fabrication plants. The metal suggests he was an aerospace professional, perhaps an engineer or metallurgist, who regularly visited titanium fabrication facilities, who found himself desperate during the massive aerospace industry layoffs of 1971. Because this specific alloy was a limited experimental product of Crucible Steel's specialty research lab, investigators cross-referenced payroll records with its narrow window of production. This targeted search identified Vince Peterson, a titanium research engineer and metallurgist whose physical profile and history align with the chemical evidence found on seat 18E. The only physical trace of Cooper ever found outside the aircraft surfaced 9 years later. In 1980, a boy digging a fire pit on a beach called Tina Bar uncovered $5,800 of the ransom money, still bound in rubber bands and buried in the sand. This mag visualizes a geographic problem. According to the SAGE radar data, Cooper exited the plane over the Lewis River Basin. Tina Bar sits 20 miles south of that drop zone, located on the banks of the Columbia River. To figure out how the money traveled 20 miles, scientists looked at diatoms, microscopic algae found in water systems. Forensic analysis of the bills revealed species of diatoms that only bloom in the Columbia River during the spring and summer months. Cooper hijacked the plane in late November 1971. The biological presence of spring algae inside the tightly bound stacks dictates that the money could not have entered the river on the night of the jump. It had to be submerged months or even years later. This timeline sharply contradicts the theory that Cooper died on impact. The diatoms imply he survived the fall, walked out of the wilderness, and he buried a portion of the cache long after the initial search teams had left the area. Cooper's jump ended the casual, lightly monitored era of mid-century air travel. He exposed a massive vulnerability. Anyone could buy a ticket with cash and carry a briefcase of explosives straight onto the flight deck without a single question asked. In response, the federal government forced an immediate overhaul of airport operations. They mandated the physical screening of all passengers and luggage, introducing the first widespread use of X-ray machines at American boarding gates. Boeing engineers also had to patch the mechanical loophole Cooper exploited. The FAA mandated the installation of the Cooper vane, an aerodynamic lock that automatically forces the exterior stairs closed the moment a plane is in flight. The FBI officially suspended the Norjack investigation in 2016, but the case is far from dormant. Driven by modern laboratory techniques and the recent recovery of a suspected parachute canopy in North Carolina, independent researchers are pursuing the remaining physical evidence with extreme precision. The final resolution now relies on biology. If geneticists can extract a viable commercial DNA profile from the tie and match it directly to a Crucible Steel employee's family tree, they can finally put a definitive name to the ghost of Seat 18E. D.B. Cooper became a fixture of American folklore because his vanishing act seemed impossible to solve. But the final chapter of his story won't be written by myth. It will be written by forensic science, systematically closing the gap between a microscopic piece of metal and a man falling through the dark.